up, YouTube? We are back with another episode of Mindset Monday. My name is Xenia, and this week I have another special guest. I have my friend Mollie McGlocklin, who is the founder of a company and podcast called Sleep is a Skill, which helps people optimize sleep through technology, behavioral change, and accountability. And as you all may know, I have been working very hard to get better sleep after years of mediocre sleep, and I'm so excited to have her on the show to learn more about what we can all do to feel more rested and alert and positive every day. So welcome to the show.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad we're able to set this up. And I really acknowledge you for taking on your sleep. I know you're doing the work. I know that you're actually like getting those results, and that's a very exciting time. So I love that.
Yeah. So welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. So the first question I want to ask you is, what got you interested in this? Like, tell me what your sleep was like before. What was that epiphanal moment that had you go, I really have to do something about this? And then how did you start foraying into this topic?
Yeah. Okay. So sleep is a skill was born out of my own problems with sleep, really, honestly. So what that looked like was for many years, really not having it in the forefront of my brain because I had it that it was just this fixed state that I had a bunch of labels around where I'm a short sleeper, I'm a bad sleeper, I'm a night sleeper or night owl. Just that's how it is. And there's not much that's going to change around that. That was like my relationship to it. And as years progressed, my habits got even more pronounced, and I was living in the middle of Manhattan, entrepreneur, burning the candle at both ends, and it progressed that different nights I'd be going to bed later and later and later, and there'd literally be times when the sun would be rising, I'm going to sleep, and that was how it was. And I would also be like justified and righteous about it from a place of like, this is it. This, whatever. I can make my own schedule. So, I'm going to keep that going. That until it really became a real a draw line in the sand moment when I actually went through my own period of insomnia. And that was when I was first beginning to travel. My boyfriend and I have been digital nomads for over 3 years now. But leading up to that, we tested the waters. And when we went out, adding jet lag to those already maladaptive behaviors that I was, speaking to that just were not working, that I wasn't willing to see, that's when it really came to a head. And I went through just days and days of no sleep. And it was so disempowering to say the least, but also embarrassing and shameful and sort of like, how can I not get myself to make a difference in this area that, it seems kids can do it, like anyone can do this thing and I can't do it. Right. And so one of the worst moments was when I was at just like a total wit's end and went to the doctors in Croatia, and with Google Translate, couldn't even speak the language, and telling them I can't sleep. It's been days, like help. And they didn't, they were very kind, but didn't really know much what to do with me. And I leave with their like a prescription of their version of Ambien, their generic version for Ambien. And in that moment, it was sort of this identity, a rock of my identity, because it's in that moment it was, okay, am I going to be taking this thing to have to sleep for how long? Is this my new life? Like, what is the plan here? But also feeling very disempowered from what other steps could I take? So from there it became very clear that I was going to need to solve this problem for myself. And really went down the rabbit hole, learned everything I could around chronobiology, circadian rhythms, infradian rhythms, all the things that can make a difference with sleep. And then on the other side of it, it was just my whole life, really transformed, because then I was able to not only restore, that homeostasis to my sleep, but actually experience optimized sleep that I had certainly never had before, and particularly consistently. So from that place, it just grew from, one-on-ones to small groups, now online coaching and podcasting and newsletters and all kinds of things around how can we help support people in their journey around their sleep.
Okay, great. So tell me what you did first. Like, what were some of the first behavioral changes that you made to really improve your sleep?
Yeah, great question. So on my website, I kind of do a tongue-in-cheek outline just of a long list of all the things that I started doing and how some of them just didn't yield the best results. And, it was kind of that, throwing things against the wall to see what sticks. And so one of those approaches that I certainly hope I can ensure that people don't have to go down that rabbit hole. So what some of those look like were trying hypnosis, meditation, breath work, just a series of things that I was putting a lot of pressure onto those areas and looking for results for my sleep. And then every night that when it wouldn't go that way, then I would be mad and I would be like, why can't I get this figured out? And looking for that kind of one hit, thing that's going to solve it all. And it unfortunately doesn't really work like that with sleep, was what I really learned. And so what really did begin to make the difference was once I started more operating from two key frameworks that we now utilize with sleep as a skill. One being the sleep tripod, so ensuring that we're approaching our psychology, our physiology, and our environment to help make a difference with our sleep. So, and really finding workability within there. And then the second framework is circadian rhythm entrainment. And so, from that place, it's what are some of the key things that we can do to strengthen our circadian rhythm. And within that realm, it was really fascinating from a place of how are we not all talking about this? There's just so much there. And to break it down for just the practical application, the most important being two things. One, our connection to light and our connection to temperature. And then, of course, with light, we can get more nuance, but if there's light, there's also our relationship with darkness and how that looks in the evening and what that does to our melatonin production. And then underneath temperature, there's a number of things that can influence our bodily temperature. So one, our meal timing, our meal type, our exercise type and timing, just some of our consistency around our sleep patterns, of course, the ambient temperature in our environment, bedding, what have you, but also from a chronopharmacological perspective. So looking at different drugs that we might be utilizing at different points of the day, whether it's supplements, whether it's very socially accepted drugs, if it's caffeine or alcohol, marijuana, or otherwise, also prescription drugs, all of these things, and depending on the timing, that can influence our bodily temperature. And then, of course, for women at different parts of our cycle, if we're at menstruating age, then that can certainly affect that temperature too. So those are some of the things that we can do to make a difference with our sleep within that framework. And I found that then once I started actually strategically applying it in that way, the results around my sleep really, really improved with more velocity and consistency.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we're trying to address your emotional environment, your physical environment within your own body, and then the actual sleep environment of the bedroom. And trying to address each of those things is how we arrive at this idea that sleep is a skill. I know for myself, looking at like all the technologies that exist, there's things that can help cool you down as you're sleeping, and then there's breath work that I've been doing before I go to bed. It's hard to get past sometimes that cynicism of like, this is ridiculous, sleep should be easy, somehow we should all just naturally fall asleep, and who needs all this stuff to go to bed? But it turns out the indoor environment is actually filled with things like drugs like caffeine, like a very insulated, the bed itself, the foam mattresses and the blankets can be a very insulating environment, right? The phone can obviously be really addictive and like affect your ability to calm your mind. So we're definitely not the cavemen that we used to be, in an environment where the light and the cooling of the temperature and the lack of stimulation helps us go to sleep. So how do you turn your sort of artificial internal and indoor environment that we have now in 2020 into like a better environment for sleep, given all those things?
Yeah, great points. And so shifting our environment, while it might occur for some people as like, really, do I need to do all this stuff? Kind of to that point, I think that was so well said and can be so frustrating, especially when we're just in this space of like, I'm exhausted. I just want to make this happen. I also don't want to be like this fragile thing that needs all these special and possibly expensive items to improve my sleep quality. So I totally get all that. And at the same time, there's a lot that we can do really affordably or free to really make a difference with our sleep environment and do a little bit of that work up front, but the yield will be tremendous if you do that. And so part of it coming from that commitment that, okay, yes, I'm taking on this area, making this a sleep sanctuary or whatever verbiage you want to put on it. And to help support that, we do have a free downloadable PDF called The Optimized Bedroom. So 18 strategic tips to make a difference for your bedroom. And you can download that and just sort of like walk through that, have that in hand, and go through your entire space to help make a difference with those. And you can, including in there, is both low tech and high tech optionality. And so from that, really just the overarching goals are that we're looking to make it cool, dark, and quiet, very cave-like. So how can we make our space really, really cave-like for sleep, but also not neglecting all of that time leading up to sleep, because that's really crucial to set us up so that we're not just laying there, for hours on end, or however it might look for different people, or having fragmented sleep and waking up a bunch. So instead, you can also ensure that you're making it very, very dim and cool in those hours leading up to your sleep. And there's some really interesting research around just looking at dynamic lighting versus static lighting out of NASA for on their space shuttles to help keep astronauts kind of on their circadian rhythm. That once we have that dynamic lighting like that, where it's really nice and dim before going to bed, and then certainly blackout when we're sleeping, then melatonin production is just like a measurable shift for so many of these studies that they've run time and time again versus static lighting and just the same type of lighting all day long. And if you think about it from an ancestral perspective, it makes a ton of sense because for thousands of years as hunter-gatherers, we would have been very closely tethered to the rhythms of nature. And when the sun would set, it was just suddenly dark and cold, or cooler. And so beyond maybe like a bonfire or later on in human history, maybe a candle, lanterns, for the most part, we were really connected to that timeline. And it's really only been since Edison that we've been able to establish this kind of 24-hour optionality for our days. And if you're like I was, I really ran with that and had my days upside down to the schedule that we want to create. So learn from my mistakes and really help support your body, because we are diurnal creatures, meaning that we're meant to be active by day and at rest at night. So just even starting with that lighting approach can really, really help do a big, heavy lifting for you of setting up this automaticity of getting tired around the same time. And then the temperature is going to also help support that as well. And then, of course, sound is a big one for, whether it's micro wake ups throughout the night or actual wake ups throughout the night or too early, depending on your partner's schedule or, just any external noises. So doing the heavy lifting up front can really make a difference there.
Okay, wow. Yeah. So, I mean, when you get into this topic, right, like it seems so simple, like make your environment cool and quiet and dark. But obviously, with the advent of things like smartphones and, maybe a partner that you have in your environment, sometimes that can be surprisingly difficult to
Yes.
access. So, what I've done is I've start to switch my lights from, being bright to being more dim. I turn on sort of orange and like red LED lighting to kind of activate my nervous system into more of like a resting zone. I've been trying to watch my caffeine intake. I actually switched from coffee to a cacao drink every day.
Great.
Yeah, that's been really helpful lately. And, I find that breath work or listening to binaural beats in the evening really helps calm me down. I did another video about things that I'm doing to improve my sleep. And the three big things were changing my lighting, I think, and binaural beats and breath work and using a screen curfew. And the screen curfew is surprisingly the hardest one.
Yeah.
But doing those things every night, has been really helpful. But before I started doing those things, I would get obsessed with like, what's my bedtime routine? Everyone says I need to have a good bedtime routine. I need to do the same thing every night. And if I just have a bedtime routine, somehow the sleep thing will take care of itself. And I think we all relate to sleep as like this thing that's just going to happen. Like the body has to do it. So it's just going to happen, where it's much more like you say in your work, it's a skill. It's like fitness, right? Like I have to choose a workout and make sure that I get it done and be effective with my form. And you don't just do one night or one workout and it's done. You have to be in the habit of living an active lifestyle the same way. Oh my God, shocking. You have to be in the habit of living a restful lifestyle. Like, what a concept in a capitalist society obsessed with working and activity and all that stuff. So, those are the things that I've been doing. And I want to ask you how you feel about this sort of obsession with bedtime routines that we see in sleep media.
Well, wow. I so acknowledge you for all of those things. That's fantastic. You're my kind of gal. And, I really do acknowledge you for clearly seeing, okay, this is the area I'm going to transform and doing all the work necessary. And to your point, not just once over, but many, many times to really make that lasting difference. So that's amazing. And it just makes me think of underscoring a good analogy for that can be when we're traveling internationally and we're trying to adjust time zones. If anyone's ever done like the 12 time zone type of shift, it can be a lot, right? And so, if we just really tried to make a difference with the adjustment process, expose ourselves to the light of that, new destination spot only one day out of the time we were there, it would be mega confusing, and it just really wouldn't work in order to shift ourselves appropriately because it takes many, many, many days, just even for that one trip. And if we're thinking of for ourselves of maintaining a consistent hormonal pattern, a cascade of results that really happen when we have a consistent bedtime wake time. It is that stacking effect, that compounding effect. So really, really wise call out there. And
Also,
yeah, go ahead.
I've been working on it, and like when I have a night where I go to bed at like 4 or 5 in the morning, which is what I used to do like regularly, right? When I do that, I'm like, okay, yesterday's workout wasn't very good. Maybe I'm feeling it today. I'm sore. I'm impacted by that. But let me try again. Let me have a good workout tonight, right? Like I'm relating it as like this sort of skill and this like almost like a fitness oriented task is very different than the way I used to talk about it. I used to talk about it as once my sleep schedule is bad this week. Oh, my sleep schedule's messed up. I can't. I'm on this schedule now. And like, it's as if it's impossible to enact the various things that would start to pull it back into a more traditional schedule or healthier kind of way of doing things. So I think the language we use about sleep is really powerful.
I love that too. I know that really is helpful for because we can all, I think, relate to that at different points of our lives, and really putting yourself back in the driver's seat around that, and not having it this external thing, the sleep schedule this week or what have you, and instead, doing what it takes from ourselves and from consistency and that discipline to enact what we want for our sleep, and that's huge, huge, huge. And so I so acknowledge you for doing that. And right now in 2020, during time of pandemics and a lot of stress for so many people, it's been a really hard and challenging time for many people because they might have had an external kind of system. So for many of those that are used to having that 9 to 5, and now suddenly they're remote working or not at all. And during that time, I've had so many people. Really just dealing with their sleep because it had been externally regulated. And now, when it comes to a time when we need to regulate this, or entrepreneurs are closely connected to that, how it can be both this feel like a blessing and a curse depending on where you're at different parts of it. But once you start reining that in for yourself, it can be so, so powerful. So it's really great.
Yeah. So I mean, do you think that bedtime routine is like one of those kind of I guess the word is like panacea for people? Like, if you have a bedtime routine and you really stick to it, is that like sort of the kind of answer? I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. Or is it more about like your attitude about sleep? Is that just as important, if not more important than your bedtime routine? Like, what do you think?
Yeah. So one of the things that I try to work with people to do is have a clear two-part system to their day so that it's very obvious that we were active, we had our body temperature up throughout the day, we're getting lots of sunlight exposure for vitamin D, which is important as a precursor for serotonin and melatonin. The movement, all of that activity is happening. Also, all those we're dealing powerfully with those things that are stressing us out that we might later ruminate about at night. So really proactive during those daylight hours, but then as a two-part setup that once the sun sets, then we're really shifting over to downshifting and whatever that might look for people. For some people, it might have that kind of beautiful routine where they do yoga, stretching, and light music, and the whole thing. I mean, that's never really worked for me very much, but some people might do that, and we want people to have the freedom to have it look how whatever channels that downshifting of the brain for them. But often, a couple things that no matter what, from a circadian rhythm perspective, can help is that in that two-part element, that then we're bringing in that dimming and cooling, because that will help ensure that then we're moving over to a natural, on a physiological perspective, downshifting. So we're not having to fight that fight that we might have if we, go out grocery shopping late at night and get all those fluorescent lights, and it's a whole other experience, right? So I don't like for people to get too married to their bedroom or nighttime routine from a place of becoming dogmatic or stressed about it. I really will have clients that get stressed, and as if they failed if they weren't able to fulfill this 10 steps bedtime routine. And what can be really helpful, almost as if we're sleep training kids, where there might always sort of be, even if it amounts to 1 or 2 minutes of, okay, now we turn off the lights, now we relax, now we maybe just say what we're grateful for, or just some of those basic things that are foundational and almost Pavlovian of a response of, okay, now this is when I start going to sleep. Same way we might trigger up, we wash our face. Okay, this is the time before rest. But either way, what we find is that when people start having that consistency, as much as we might shirk that or resist that, it can really help do a lot of that work for us, so that we naturally find ourselves more relaxed. The other thing I do find is with particularly entrepreneurs, a difficulty of allowing themselves to be really off and not still working, or having that sense that I should be working, or even if you're sitting there, you're literally not doing a thing, you're whatever, watching a movie or something, and your mind is off with the stress of what you need to do. So helping to train that, to really learn that, okay, this is a very important time for myself to actually unwind and go into recovery.
Wow, yeah, I really get what you mean about people being obsessive with bedtime routines, because I've seen, within my family and in my own life, being a very sort of type A personality, who loves to work hard and make things happen and get stuff done. I'll create this sort of routine for myself, and then I'm so attached to it because now it's another type of achievement that I want to make happen. And the spirit of rest is not really in the routine. The spirit of doing and making things happen and moving around and stretching and then skincare routine and all this stuff, versus the spirit of wind down and slow down and rest. And then if I don't get to do one of the things on my OCD sort of list, well, oh God, I can't, now I can't rest. So that it can really backfire when you're obsessed with bedtime routines. And I think we really see that in the kind of hyper productivity focused culture we have.
Ah, so well said. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much of that, and then unfortunately, when we will go into that state, then we're setting ourselves up for that kind of heightened emotional state, heightened brain activity, and then we're even more having to do all that work to kind of bring ourselves back down. And so I really hear you about that, and I also have found that for a lot of clients too, it's that lack of confidence in the area around sleep. And so if they feel like they're already failed before they even did this performative act of getting that great night of sleep, it can be really upsetting. So helping to remove that sleep pressure, I think, is really important. To be free to, the whole intention around those bedtime routines is just to remind ourselves that this is our time, kind of relax, bring things down, versus having it to look a particular way. And I really relate to that. So I I appreciate you saying that because that was a big part of my pitfall, was that I had this, 18-step process or what have you before bed for so long. And what I was left with was just, such levels of stress and then upset when it wouldn't go the way that I wanted it to go. So really good point.
Yeah, I really get that. And it's so funny how, we can like turn it into, what was I going to say? We turn it into like this story, like I have to do this, and this, and then, then I'll be rested versus the spirit of like, wow, I really deserve some rest and I'm allowed to do that. And let me wind down. I think it's so important to tell yourself that because the culture we live in doesn't tell you that, right? Like the culture we live in is so focused on doing and not on resting. I mean, look at Ariana Huffington, who wrote her book about sleep after having the epiphany that people around her were obsessed with productivity. So those of you who don't know, Ariana Huffington famously was very sleepy at her desk one day, in a culture within her company, Huffington Post, where she was just working herself to the bone, and she like fell asleep at her desk and hit her head and injured herself. And I think it was, very, very stressful injury. She started bleeding or ended up in the hospital or something like that. And then realized, wow, why is this a point of pride for people that, oh, you got 2 hours? I got no sleep last night. I was up all night. I pulled an all-nighter. I worked so hard. And she started really advocating for sleep. So it's such a cultural paradigm shift. What to advocate for sleep is like, I think, a courageous thing that you're doing in America right now.
It's so true. And it's funny because I know our background is with our shared love of personal development. And actually, that was a bit of a thing that was tripping me up for a period where, this sense that, okay, so I should be able to have mind over matter. Okay, so even if I only got a couple hours of sleep last night, I should be able to really just, trudge through this, be able to, handle this differently. And which was really just I think this old way of thinking that was more pervasive years back, where, okay, if you're really committed to something, you're committed to having a great life, you'll go to bed late, you'll wake up early, you'll do what it takes, which, and I really appreciate I think, undertones of what that's meant to stand for is like do whatever it takes, which I think is really important. And yet at the same time, I think there's this new paradigm shift around sleep, like that great kind of example of Ariana Huffington of now that we know better, we know more than we did even just a few years ago. This area around sleep is really, there's still so many mysteries within the sleep community, but even with what we're now understanding, it's helping to underscore the importance of this so much more. And particularly a couple larger findings in more recent years, like the connection to neurodegenerative issues around dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and as it seems to really heavily correlate with extended sleep deprivation over a period of time. And suddenly more and more articles are touting the importance of this. So we're slowly, I think, starting to shift that narrative, which is an exciting time. And I just think it's important to point to that we just many years ago didn't quite understand what the impact could be by running ourselves that way around sleep.
Yeah, yeah. So everybody, Mollie and I met taking some seminars at an organization called Landmark, which is a very transformative place. And we both did the Landmark Forum many years ago, and much of that work really has you look at what's important to me. What are my values, and how can I preserve my integrity first with myself and my well-being, but also with my word, with other people in my life. And it's profound work, but sometimes when you get into some of those deeper courses, like leadership coursework, where you're spending a lot of time developing yourself, maybe coaching and developing other people, or if you're an entrepreneur or just a hardworking person, you're going through periods where you're intensely working on some big important goal or developmental period, right? We get into that attitude of like, I have to go for it, I have to be relentless, I have to be determined, which is really valuable until you keel over at your desk and hurt yourself. So, I think it's funny when people ask Gary Vee, do you sleep? And he's like, yeah, I sleep 6, 7, 8 hours a night. Sleep is important, right?
Yes.
romanticize people who are productive and work hard, and sometimes imagine that somehow they don't value sleep. And it's
Yeah.
such a capitalist paradigm that just like needs to go to bed, you know?
Very well said. And yeah, I'm so grateful for our work at Landmark. It's really just changed my entire life. I know that's part of the difference that's been made of even in this area around sleep. Just having that in the background was huge. And also, I think what's interesting is when you tend to gravitate towards different personal development. You tons of books that you can find, and and often that might be that source point of wanting to ensure that we can be part of that rare pack that can go on the 4 hours, 5 hours a night and just show up powerfully. And so I think that it's an interesting time for this area because I do think it's starting to be looked at with new eyes, and really getting more of that attention that it deserves in our overall health and wellness. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so now I want to do a quick sort of lightning round, name dropping some fancy stuff. Okay, so obviously, sleep is a skill in and of itself, as you say with your podcast and your company. I just love that phrase. I walk around thinking that phrase lately. I'm like, sleep's a skill. Am I practicing? Am I
Yes.
practicing my skills? This is important, right?
Love that.
Are some cool foods and gadgets and companies and things that are yummy and fun and interesting that can help you strengthen your skill, much like in the fitness industry you can buy all sorts of exercise bands and weights and devices and cute workout outfits. There are similarly really delicious teas that you can buy, and supplements and face masks and cooling devices and all sorts of things that can help you get more sleep. I'm wearing a very expensive ring right now that you and others recommended to me called an Aura ring, Oura, and it tracks my sleep data every night, and it tells me a sleep score and how much REM sleep I got and all of that. And this thing can set you back 200 or 300 bucks, but I think it's really valuable. But there are some other things that I know about that you know about. I'll mention one other thing that I really like, and then I want you to tell me about some of the cool sleep technologies that you've heard about. So last night I had a tea by a company called Four Sigmatic, mushroom chai tea. And it is so delicious and calming, and that like cardamom, ginger just really puts you into a sleep zone. So, I like my teas and yummy sleep things, and I really like my Aura ring, and of course, my red lights, and I think sleep masks and blackout blinds are essential. But what are some of the cool technologies that you've ended up learning about while producing your podcast, and that you maybe like or use yourself?
Yeah. So first of all, the Four Sigmatic, some of their products are fantastic. We just had them on the podcast just yesterday. So they've got lots of different gems and things that they're working on, to kind of have this be something that you can have in the morning for around some of your adaptogens and what have you. And then into the evening for, as you pointed to, that nice and relaxing experience around it, and how those adaptogens can help, improve some of our sleep results. So that's a great one. And as far as the actual, kind of sleep tech, oh my goodness, it is such an industry right now. I went to, back when you could actually go to live events, went to CES, which is one of the largest events, tech events in the world. And it was this huge display of sleep tech. So it was just overwhelming what is not only on the market right now, but what's coming. And, to that point around what can we do from it? We don't want to also go broke in order to be able to sleep. So what are the most important things? So one, every single client that I work with right now here in 2020 does use the Aura ring, just from a facet of it's particularly sticky as a habit tracker, so it's just easy to use. There's other ones that are head based that while actually some of the sleep staging information might be superior to some of the trackers that are on the hand and the wrist. Unfortunately, the usability isn't quite there, so they're still kind of falling off, gaps in the data. So for the most part, using something like an Aura ring is a great place to begin, especially because not only are they looking at sleep tech, but you're also getting a number of biometrics for looking at your health and well-being. So body temperature, which can be really insightful, particularly for women that are still menstruating. And then you can look at your respiratory rate. I've had clients that even just by using that and seeing their respiratory rate kind of being outside of the bell curve, that it was enough of a reason for them to get a sleep lab done. And then lo and behold, they either had, mild, moderate, severe sleep apnea just from, one of these consumer grade wearables, kind of giving that clue. Then of course heart rate and how the kind of arc of that throughout your night and what that can tell you about some of your behaviors and how you can help improve those. And HRV is a really particularly interesting metric to track since it's a readout of our autonomic nervous system and really how stressed we might be both in our body, mind, and environmentally. So even things like air quality and what have you can go into those readouts. So that one's a great place to start, and it actually takes the place of what we used to be told to do many years ago, was to keep a sleep diary. So this kind of acts as that automated sleep diary for us. And then the next thing that I have most people invested in, there's a spectrum of pricing on this, but getting a good pair of blue blockers, but ensuring that they're not the clear ones, that they're either amber or red for the evenings, just to cut a bit more of that brighter light, particularly blue and green based. So those can be really helpful. And I will say, some can get pricey. There also are some on Amazon that have some of that external testing too. So you can, and those can be really affordable. So you can kind of find wherever, fits you and your budget. Then another more affordable one tends to be just investing in some of these red or amber based bulbs, spend $10 on these things, or for some people, a Himalayan salt lamp, if you want to have a little less of the red light district look, or just a couple candles. I mean, this is the tech that we're really speaking to. And it's kind of that antiquated and yet suddenly became really important as we look at sleep quality. But so as we move out of the light conversation, then also temperature, a lot of clients will find really great results with cooling their bedroom temperature, because we're looking to drop that by 2 to 3 degrees on average, which is a decent number for core body temperature. So things like the chili pad are particularly popular. There's also the bed jet, although I have found more people become a bit more uncomfortable with that one because it can be a bit of a Goldilocks effect, because it's kind of blowing right on you, but still an option. And then of course, if you can, lower your ambient bedroom temperature, we want to do that too. But often because of the type of bedding that we have, it might not be sufficient. And then there are a number of things that you can get more nuanced on. If you do want to get into the sleep stages, you can get some of the, so Dream is a tracker that will get more kind of accurate sleep staging information. And that is on your head. I found that men tend to do a bit better with that than our long-haired women, since we have our sensors, the spots where our hair can kind of get in the place of that. Also, if anxiety is part of the conversation, which it is for many of us when we can't sleep, or that hyper aroused brain state, a couple of gadgets that can sometimes make a difference for people to kind of gamify meditation or breath work is one being heart math. They have an inner balance trainer that you can work with to help train ourselves to get back that breathing and kind of lower our heart rate. The Muse headband is one that can kind of help guide you in meditation and bring you back gently when you've gone off by really reading your brainwave states. So, those are some that we could consider if we're looking to transform our sleep. And then, of course, the supplement category, some people really go to town on this one. I have concerns about just kind of blanket giving out supplement, advice for a lot of people, just since it's so bio-individual and kind of that test, don't guess approach. But if there was one supplement that I would mention for a number of people, could more of a broad category would be magnesium glycinate. Tends to be particularly helpful for people in the evening, just since it tends to be so deficient in our soil and our food supply, and just the level of stress that many of us, kind of are under. Find that can be really helpful. And then a free supplement that you can get is actually being outside in the sun in the particularly morning hours to get that vitamin D, and also getting connected to where you are in the Fitzpatrick scale around your skin type. So ensuring that you're getting out for sufficient needs for you where you fall. So, I'm Irish and very pale. And so I might have a different length of time than, other people might have it from other parts of the world. So we want to make sure that all people are getting their kind of individual needs, but that's really important for sleep to be able to develop that melatonin at night.
Wow, I'm loving this list of items that I will now have to put in the description of this video. That is,
Great.
and it really sounds like people say this all the time, right? And I heard Ksenia, my former interview guest, and your former interview guest
Yes, it's great.
episode, that a good night of sleep kind of starts in the morning. So you want to have a day that supports your night and a night that supports your day, right? So you have exercise, you have sun exposure, you have all sorts of other wellness practices, and then you're getting ready for bed, and you want to be sure that what you're consuming, what you're intaking, drinks, foods, things like that, helps you wind down, that your light environment, your temperature environment helps you wind down. I am personally so curious about the chili pad, because the world famous personal development hacker himself, Tim Ferriss, says it's just the thing that's changed his life more than any other purchase. And ever since he said that, it's just perfect marketing for them. I've been so
Yes.
curious to see if that sort of temperature aspect is like a real unlock for me personally, because I get pretty hot when I sleep, and I like weighted blankets and things like that as well. So that can also make you hot. So I'm definitely looking to maybe invest in something like that in the future. And I think the list of gadgets is very appealing because it does kind of make you think, oh, maybe there's something I can buy that will solve this.
Yes.
Not true, but it is fun to play with toys. And I think that's really interesting. So thanks for that list.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the chili pad thing. So for in the beginning part of sleep as a skill, I was hesitant to mention too many gadgets just because we were digital nomads and we had backpack carry on. Certainly couldn't carry around or chili pad or anything, and wanted to help support people from a perspective of, okay, so what's the bare bones things, is particularly if you are traveling and you don't have as much necessarily control over your environment. How can you be resilient? How can you do all those things? So there is that kind of element of it, but at the same time, what's interesting about chili pad is there is an argument that even though it might sound so extra, that it's kind of harkening back to possibly how we used to sleep for thousands of years, because we were much more outdoor creatures, previously. So during that time, we would be more likely to be sleeping on the ground, which is much cooler innately. And then the argument around, sleeping with animal hides and heavy items, which would give credence or possible credence to the idea of around where this weighted blanket thing, why is that calming? So some theories around why that might actually be bringing us back more to how we were before, even though it sounds so next level and nouveau. While you were also speaking, another thing that you made me think of too, that because all of these kind of depend on some are going to be helpful across the board, but some people might have situations where it calls for of the order and importance, then we might kind of shuffle them for them. And so another case for that might be if people are dealing with frequent wake ups at night, or anxiety, that things like, so like this is a continuous glucose monitor out of, this one's from Levels, and different companies that will help, people that are, not dealing with diabetes right now, which is how it used to really just be solely marketed around. Now this is for those of us that are actually looking to improve our glucose relationship, how that can also improve our sleep. So we're going to actually be running with Levels Health a whole dashboard to overlay sleep data and glucose data. So it's going to be really interesting because there are, already, like, it lines up, you get to see, it's really fascinating when we have some of those glucose crashes at night. um, and then a corresponding wake up, because when it crashes, then then it can signal that cortisol and adrenaline in our body, and then suddenly we're up. And sometimes it can be really frustrating because we're like up and up, like just not okay. There's a sense that I am not going back to sleep anytime soon, or just that frustration of waking up in general during the night. So things like that can be really eye opening, even if you're using those on a short term, like like a 1 month period, where you get to really see the power of the choices that we make around food type and timing, since glucose runs us on a circadian rhythm.
Yeah, yeah. And if people are not, ready to invest in something like an Aura Ring or, a chili pad, obviously you can, toggle the temperature within
Yeah.
your room or from your air conditioner. You could use, a sleep tracking app that listens to your breathing. Like I've used something called Sleep Score, and it definitely gives me slightly different data than the Aura Ring. I still use both at night right now, and Sleep Score always says I slept a little better than the Aura Ring.
Yes.
Probably more accurate. Um, but it's maybe a little more optimistic, but it's still cool to have some data because sleep is so mysterious. You just fall asleep and then you have some idea of how you slept, and then you wake up and you're like, what even happened? I was
Yes.
hours. So nice to have data, and it's a fun area to get into biohacking, I think.
Oh, I think it's so fun, and really, of course, back in my example of when I was in my periods of insomnia and just like a whole other mind state, I can certainly share that I was in this no possibility, like this, there's nothing that can be, silver lining. There's nothing good that can come out of this. Blah, blah, blah. And then now looking at it, hindsight 2020, it's like this was the best thing that ever happened to me. And so I hope that I can underscore that if anyone is listening to this and going through their own difficulties with their sleep, even if it's not as extreme as maybe mine was, but just sort of like frustration or resignation or any of those states, that there is so much that we can actually learn from, because part what it took for me was really to turn my life upside down and really get responsible for so many things that just weren't working in the way that I was managing myself and my life. So I think for all of us, it can be a really great way to kind of keep us in check for our health and well-being. And so if we use that as a kind of metric each day, and particularly, I'm making the argument that it really can be serve as the most important area that we take on in our health and well-being. So that we can have what it takes to then get ourselves to the gym, make those healthy decisions with our food, and all the other things that it takes to have a healthy life. So it's just paramount and foundational. And once you begin to have that consistently and feel the effects of that, I think that can, really sell itself first, for us. And I really say that now at this point, I'm addicted to feeling good. So I'm willing to do the behavioral changes necessary to continue to wake up with a knowingness that I'll feel in ways that I used to never have access to.
Yeah, that's exactly how I wanted to kind of wrap this up. I could talk to you all day, but I do want to, kind of summarize by reminding people. I mean, this series is called Mindset Monday, right? Like I've started this on YouTube because I just wanted to share things that were making me feel positive and happy every day in my life, and I am like a different person when I am rested. I really
Yes.
I attack my workouts differently. I have more ideas. I feel super creative. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely been some anomaly days where I'm very tired and I still feel so creative and so witty. And then you start thinking the illusion of that sleep deprivation is somehow good for you. When you have days like that, you start thinking
Yes.
that I with no integrity in this area and I'll be fine.
Yes.
Really does catch up with you, and I am so happy and productive, and I react so much more optimistically to life. I am so much less easily triggered by people, situations, communications that would normally stress me out. So that's the real reason to get better sleep. Aside from the obvious health benefits, the mood benefit is huge, right?
Huge, huge. And you're really touching on so many important points with that. And I think it's such an amazing domino effect when we start working on our sleep, because I would argue that it's challenging to find an area that it doesn't impact. When we get that sleep in a positive way, and then on the other flip side, when we don't get that sleep in a maybe disempowering way. So And what's really helpful is I think if we do embody the sense that, or the context that sleep is a skill, it can remove some of those labels that we spoke about before and have from a kind of a blank canvas of, okay, so if I'm really at the source of my sleep, then it's just a matter, if it's a skill, then it's just a matter of learning what there is to learn in the 21st century to help support that, and then continuing to improve in that area consistently. And I think just the results, can really be transformative for people.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. So thank you so much for giving everybody a new context about sleep. That's so clearly what you're doing. We want to switch from the idea that sleep is somehow natural or should be easy or something that just happens or is something that's hard for me in particular, right? To this idea that even in Manhattan, maybe everybody can hear all the cars beeping near my um, no matter where you are, that it's just a skill. It's such a great contextual shift. So thank you for providing that for everyone.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you for having me on your show and for what you're doing for people and just spreading that positive message. And just grateful to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, everybody, I will make sure that we have information about Mollie and her phenomenal podcast. I will link to some of my favorite episodes of the podcast, and I will link to some of the different things that we talked about in the description of this video. And thanks for watching. Bye.